Hey everyone, my name is Wedge. Last time we reviewed Khans of Tarkir and were introduced to the 5 Khans leaders and their unique offerings to the commander format. Once again, we have a new set of multicolor commanders to try out, as well as a bonus set of legendary dragons. Let's take a look at what Fate Reforged has to offer. Alicia, who smiles at death, is our Mardu commander and is a little different than the heavy-hitting Zergo Helm Smasher. Instead of being a threat by herself, Alicia requires a little building around and benefits from hordes of smaller creatures. A 3/2 first strike for 3 mana doesn't sound impressive, but her ability in combat can make things interesting. When Alicia attacks, you can pay 2 hybrid black/white mana to return a creature with power 2 or less from the graveyard into play tapped and attacking. The immediate reaction to Alicia is to try and jam as many 2-power creatures into a deck and swarm your enemies. While it is likely that you're going to prioritize more aggressive creatures, there are some slower creatures like Karmic Guide and or Avalanche Riders that give you extra effects when they enter the battlefield. With those 2 examples, you won't mind having them die as you can just get them back again. The creatures you reanimate do have to attack, so I wouldn't recommend creatures you don't want attacking like Kiki-Jiki. Alicia is a warrior and also the first Mardu commander that is legal in tiny leaders, which may be the best fit for her. The ability gets significantly better when you can get almost all your creatures back. It'll also be easier to attack in with Alicia compared to regular commander, as there won't be as much big stuff in the way. Warrior Tribal may be the optimum way to go with all the support it's receiving in Khans block and fits the commander's aggressive theme. Dagatar the Adamant is the second Obzan commander and, like Anafenza, is a cost-effective creature with an interesting ability. For 4 mana, you get a 0/0 with 4+1/+1 counters on it, immediately having synergy with Doubling Season in case you want the potential 8/8. Vigilance is a nifty plus in case you plan to tab Dagatar for some reason. For 1 mana and 2 hybrid black-green mana, you can move a +1/+1 counter from one creature onto another target creature. The ability isn't groundbreaking by any means, but can lead to some interesting interactions depending on how you play it. Graft, Evolve, Modular, Scavenge, Reinforce, Amplify, Bloodthirst, Unleash, Outlast, Bolster, Monstrous, Undying, Sunburst, Tribute, Devour, and Heroic are all abilities that use +1/+1 counters, so some combination of those cards may lead to some interesting interactions with Dagatar. The +1/+1 counter lords from Khans block may also be useful cards to move counters onto or just run with Dagatar at all. Do we think Dagatar is a commander you want to build around? Maybe. Honestly, it's a perfect utility card for a deck like Gav Guru of Spores. Assuming you can get creative, it could make for an interesting commander. Tasigur the Golden Fang is our Sultai entry for Fate Reforged and is the first commander that you can delve to pay for. Alternate costs are generally pretty good for a commander, and with a 100 card deck, it'll be easy to reliably and repeatedly cast Tasigur for less than its actual cost. I don't expect it to be broken like Derevi, but taking away the drawback of recasting the commander can be strong with the right card. All of your delving will lead to a 4/5 with a powerful mill ability. 2/2 hybrid blue-green mana allows you to mill the top 2 cards of your library, then an opponent chooses a non-land card in your graveyard, and you return it to your hand. Just like Sidisi, you'll want to build your deck around self-milling and pack as many non-land cards as you can to maximize the ability. Even though your opponent chooses, getting a repeatable non-land regrowth for 4 mana is pretty strong. Returning a Massacre Worm, Tidespout Tyrant, or Avenger of Zendikar may be enough to win you a game. Getting repeatable Shriekmaw, Eternal Witness, or Muldrifter is also a solid way to develop your board and get ahead. Another perk is delving away the excess cards to cast Tasigur, meaning you can get rid of the junk and force your opponent to give you good spells. Naturally, you want to be able to get as much stuff in your graveyard as possible. Dredge cards aren't as good here, as an opponent will likely just give you a Stinkweed Imp when you want to Machias the Unhallowed. We recommend cards like Increasing Confusion, Fascination, or Traumatize so you can get them back and reuse them later. Tasigur is another interesting build-around card that, while unpredictable, can lead to some cool games. If you're looking for a different spin on the graveyard deck, it's worth a shot. Shu Yun the Silent Tempest is not as good as Narset, unfortunately, and suffers from the fact that it needs both creatures and spells to function fully. A 3/2 for 3 with Prowess isn't very imposing, and unless you can cast a bunch of spells in a turn, then Prowess isn't going to be too relevant in Commander. On top of that, you can probably win the game already if you can cast a bunch of spells in one turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can pay 2 hybrid red-white mana to give target creature double strike until end of turn. Depending on what spells you're casting, it's going to be difficult to give more than a couple creatures double strike at a time. You are going to have to do a lot of work just to get multiple activations. You're also going to have to find the right balance of creatures and spells to make Shuyun work. An interesting spin could be a Voltron deck with Shuyun as the win condition. Casting powerful equipment to give Shuyun double strike then suiting him up may be a viable way to beat down some opponents. Then again, you could just play Ruhan of the Fomori and have to do less work. Overall, Shuyun requires an awful lot of work for a pretty minimal effect and is likely the worst of the 5 commanders spoiled for the format specifically. Just keep playing Narset until the next commander comes around. Unless, of course, you're playing Tiny Leaders. If that's the case, just go nuts. We'll wrap up with Yasova Dragonclaw, the first spoiled commander in the set and a stark contrast to Surrak Dragonclaw in Khans. Yasova is smaller as a 4-2 with Trample, but only costs half as much at 3 mana. She's probably never going to attack in her current state, but luckily she doesn't have to. At the beginning of your combat, you can pay 1/2 hybrid blue-red to gain control of target creature with power less than Yasova until end of turn. The creature also gains haste until end of turn and untaps. Being able to threaten a creature on each of your combats is pretty cool and can lead to some crazy blowouts if you can set up the right board. Ideally, you want to be able to get Yasova as large as possible to steal any creature on the table, then crash Yasova and the stolen creature into a player. Once combat ends, you can ditch the stolen creature with a sacrifice effect, such as Greater Good or Goblin Bombardment. There are plenty of ways to make Yasova big enough to steal anything in your way. Grafted War Gear Anthem effects such as Gaia's Anthem or Wolfhear Silverheart are some of the ways to get her huge. Once you achieve this, no creature can get in your way. Assuming you have enough open mana, extra combat steps make Yasova even better. Want to keep the creatures you steal? Conjurer's Closet or Bizarre Trader can permanently recruit your enemies. Yasova definitely has some fun interactions and also can be a Tiny Leader's commander. Of all the commanders in Fate Reforged, Yasova looks like the most interesting of the bunch. Instead of doing a section on each, we're going to put all 5 Fate Reforged dragons together. Though each of them offer unique strategies and abilities, they're all best used in a deck full of dragons in order to abuse their effects. If you decide to use any of them in Commander, just pack as many dragons as you can to get the most out of them. Atarka arguably has the best ability of them all, as Double Strike can close out games quickly, especially with multiple dragons. Turning your guys into dragon tyrants is pretty powerful even with only a couple dragons in play. All these dragons are worth considering in a deck like Scion of the Dragon, which needs as many useful dragons as it can get its hands on. Cards like Sneak Attack or Living Death can help assure you get as many dragons into play that trigger the abilities on them. Getting extra combat steps through Relentless Assault or Aggravated Assault is another way to abuse these dragons, just something to keep in mind. We hope you enjoyed our review of the Fate Reforged commanders. We won't be surprised to see these legends make a splash over the next few weeks. Didn't get enough Tiny Leaders love? Don't worry, in the coming weeks we'll have more Tiny Leaders content for you. Which Fate Reforged con is your favorite? Always interested to hear what you have to say. Remember, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source, I'm Wedge, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.